There are 8 billion people on this planet. Let's imagine that for some reason, all of humanity decides to pack up and reorganize into one single city. How big would it be? How far apart would we end up living from each other? Right now, 57% of the population already lives in cities. That means the remaining 43%, the rural folks, would have to get used to urban life. So, assuming we've gathered everyone in one spot, let's look at some real-world examples to get a sense of what living that tightly packed would actually feel like. Monaco and Singapore are by far the most densely populated countries on Earth. In Singapore, nearly 6 million people live in just 733 square kilometers, giving a density of about 8,100 people per square kilometer. Monaco pushes that even further, reaching 19,700 people per square kilometer, more than double Singapore's figure. Of course, both of those are roughly the size of a large city and a small town, respectively, and at that scale, individual cities can get even denser. Manila, the capital of the Philippines, holds a population density of 44,000 people per square kilometer, making it the most densely populated city in the world. Its total population is actually relatively modest, at around 1,850,000. And the reason for that extreme density is simply that the city itself is tiny. To put it in perspective, out of the 50 provincial capitals in Spain, a country that isn't particularly large, Manila is only bigger than 8 of them. Now, what about the highest concentration of people in a single place? That title belongs to Guangzhou in China, formerly known as Canton, where 65 million people are packed together, roughly equal to the entire population of France. But because they're spread across a large area, the density there is only about 3,300 people per square kilometer. So for our purposes, Manila remains the better benchmark. But there are even more extreme cases. The most densely populated island in the world is Île Brouet in Haiti. 500 people live there in 83 houses, all crammed into an area of just 4,000 square meters, producing a density of 125,000 people per square kilometer. The island has no doctors, no nurses, no schools, and drinking water has to be brought in by boat. There is only one toilet on the entire island, and sometimes residents simply relieve themselves in the water. And even that is not the most extreme example. The most densely populated neighborhood on the planet is Lalbagh Thana in Bangladesh, where 370,000 people live in just 2.2 square kilometers, producing a concentration of 168,000 people per square kilometer. That is despite the fact that a large, uninhabited fortress sits right in the middle of the neighborhood, which actually pulls the average density down. But there are places even more cramped than that. The most densely populated slum in the world is Dharavi in Mumbai, India. In an area roughly comparable to Lalbagh Thana, approximately 850,000 people live there, giving a density of 405,000 people per square kilometer. Overcrowding on that scale means plagues, fires, and floods are a regular part of life for its residents. To give you a sense of the scale, if you placed Dharavi inside Central Park in New York, it would only take up 2/3 of the park, housing close to 1 million people in that small section. All of Manhattan, with its enormous skyscrapers, holds 1,700,000 inhabitants. That comparison alone tells you just how unimaginably cramped those slums are. Everything mentioned so far, though, is the present day. In the past, there was a place far more claustrophobic than any of these. The most densely populated place in all of recorded history was the Kowloon Walled City in Hong Kong. Looking at the surviving photographs, you can get a rough sense of its scale by spotting the basketball courts on one side or the trucks on another. The entire footprint of those buildings covered just 0.026 square kilometers, or 26,000 square meters. A standard football pitch is roughly 7,400 square meters, so the whole city occupied an area equivalent to about 3.5 football fields. In 1990, 50,000 people lived there. That works out to a density of 1,920,000 people per square kilometer. They never went higher than that, not because they couldn't, but because they were constrained by law. Buildings were capped at 14 stories so that aircraft could fly over safely. Eventually, due to catastrophic sanitation conditions and the constant problems the city created for authorities, Hong Kong made the decision to tear all of it down, bringing an end to the most densely populated place human civilization has ever produced. Now that we have a feel for just how tightly humans can be packed together, let's apply those densities to our hypothetical global city. Starting with something easy, at the density of Argentina, 16 people per square kilometer, humanity would cover 98% of the Earth's surface. Most of us would end up living on water. That hardly counts as a city. At Spain's density, the city would be the combined size of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Still not really a city. Moving to the genuinely cramped examples. At Singapore's density, everyone on Earth would fit inside Egypt. At Monaco's density, all of humanity would live in an area roughly the size of Paraguay. At Manila's density, we'd fit inside a territory comparable to Syria. At the density of Lalbagh, the whole world population would occupy an area equivalent to Lithuania. At the density of Lalbagh Thana, we'd all fit inside the Dominican Republic. At Dharavi's density, our territory would shrink to the size of Israel. And at the density of Kowloon Walled City, the most extreme concentration of people in human history, every single person alive today would fit inside Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, we would all fit comfortably on the island of Trinidad alone, with Tobago left completely empty. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're the type who dreads sharing an elevator with a neighbor and having to make small talk about the weather, there are options for you too. At Russia's density, we'd need 7 Earths. At Canada's density, 14. Mongolia's density would require 27 planets. Alaska's density would call for 110. And at Greenland's density, the most spread-out scenario imaginable, we would need 2,060 Earths to fit everyone. You'd have to memorize the name of every single planet and its capital. So the question is, would you rather all of humanity share the island of Trinidad, or would you prefer to be scattered across 2,060 planets?